Hello everyone, it's Rev Deanna here. I am a United Church minister serving the physical communities of Daysland, Killam and Roseland and this online community of DKR United. And today I wanted to share with you a couple of reflections by authors that I admire and get emails about their work from, and I find them inspiring this day as I was musing about what to share with you. So the first is from Parker Palmer, and I shared this on our Facebook group, so if you've read it, it might be a refresher, but he writes about the first day of spring, which we had this past week. And it's the first day of spring in the Northern Hemisphere, a time to welcome new life with open arms. Well, if you recall, we had the first day of spring on Sunday, and then we had, on which we had a raging snowstorm. And so, welcome to spring in the Northern Hemisphere. It's kind of unpredictable and messy. And that's essentially what Parker talks about. And he talks about how spring is messy. The fields are mucky and wet, and before the new life springs out, you kind of end up stuck in the mire of mud. And in our case, deep snow in some parts. And Parker says the seasons of the year don't always jibe with the seasons of our lives. And he says that this year, with all that's going on in the world, like the conflict in the Ukraine and how it feels like, or can feel like, democracy is in peril. Parker is from the US, and so he is writing from that perspective. And I know there are many that feel that way in our country as well. And I know that there are many countries around the world where their democracy is definitely in jeopardy. And so Parker says, I'm going into this spring carrying a winter of the heart. And that line really resonated with me. I don't know about you, but we're post-pandemic, and there's still just this heaviness. I don't know, for me, it might be residual from the carrying that grief for the community that because we couldn't grieve together. Also our own grief about, things that we wanted to do over the past 2 years and couldn't, or the state of the world, and or all of the above. I feel like that we're going into this spring, into this new way of being, or back into a way of being, if you will, carrying a heaviness, a winter in our hearts. And so Parker goes on to say there's much that we can learn about spring. He calls it the Vernal Equinox, as green life makes a return to the frozen parts of the earth. And for Parker, these are the lessons that he reflects upon. Before spring makes things beautiful, the earth is muck and mire, a reminder that we must keep slogging toward the beloved community, refusing to let ugly ideas and actions bring us down. And that's the one I'm really struggling to do, trying to not let the ugly ideas and actions interfere with the love and kindness and compassion that are in my heart, that are a deep part of our faith, and to try and keep living into this world in that way. I'm finding that hard, and maybe you are too. Early spring is all about hummus, a word that is linked to humility, Parker says. And for me, that's a reminder that the quiet, simple forms of service that nourish the roots of human life are no less important than human acts. And I think that is important. We're in the season of Lent, and Lent is a time about reflecting on our faith and focusing on what is going to draw us closer to God, so that nourishing our roots is very important. And Parker goes on to say that spring is a testimony that no matter how hard winter gets, life has always come back and always will. And he quotes Camus saying, "In the midst of a seemingly endless winter, I discovered within myself an invincible spring." And I really like that quote about discovering within ourselves an invincible spring. I think it speaks to that struggle I said about remaining hopeful and remaining kind and loving in this time. And I think that's what we need to find, is our invincible spring, our invincible hope that nourishes our roots so that we can continue to be loving and kind. And how do you go about doing that? Well, that's where I wanted to share the writings of Dr. Amanda Kemp. She is a writer on racial justice, and I get her emails, articles out. And I was reading this week's one that arrived just after spring. And I feel it's very appropriate for this coming Sunday. We're going to talk about forgiveness and deliverance from God's promise of deliverance from all the pain and suffering and evil and in the world, and so how we can hear that message and or help bring about God's kingdom in our lives. And what Dr. Amanda Kemp wrote really kind of spoke to that, as well as kind of tied in with what Parker wrote about, that finding that invincible spring in our lives. And so Dr. Amanda Kemp says forgiveness is a signpost and not the destination. It was something that her daughter shared with her, and she goes on to say that she's been processing and testing and pondering this idea that forgiveness is a signpost and not a destination. And what she came up with is that when we make forgiveness our destination, there's an element of should or force behind it. And that even when she seeks to forgive herself, there's some sort of obligation about it, that it just seems kind of forced or like she's trying too hard. And she ponders the questions, well, what if forgiveness is the side effect of something else? What if forgiveness is not the answer? And as she continued to reflect and ponder on those questions, the answer that she came up with, which I think ties into how we can find that invincible spring in ourselves that Parker Palmer talked about, is that we need to stretch out and unkink ourselves so that we can expose ourselves to love. And when we do that and allow ourselves to receive love, that we don't hold on to those hurts and pains or maybe the guilt of the hurt and pain that we have caused. We don't hold on to that. Instead, we are filling ourselves with love, almost like how I like to do in the spring when the sun comes out and after the long, hard winter, and you go outside and you just stand in the sun and maybe even outstretch your arms and let that warmth fill your being. And that's what Dr. Kemp likened it to. Just like you let the sun shine on your skin, let the love fill you and warm you. And she said that when she tried that, she noticed that she doesn't hold on to anything. And that she quotes Rumi, I'm not sure. He says, out beyond the ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I will meet you there. And so that's like, in that mucky mire middle ground between winter and spring, out in that field is where we are called to be. What if the solution is to cultivate our capacity to receive love and to flow in love? Questions Dr. Kemp. What if right relations can't be restored without you getting the kinks out of your flow? What if your guilt or righteousness is not the highest good of anybody? And she ends with saying the answers are within each of us. And I actually feel that the answer is love, is letting ourselves tune into that love, tune into that endless spring, that invincible spring, endless winter, invincible spring that is within each of us. To tune into that and to let it fill our entire beings and to nurture that feeling and that filling of ourselves. And then it will spread. Just like how spring slowly moves north. And I hope it comes a little faster, but yes, just how spring moves up to the north, let that hope, that love, that kindness spread from each of us, and that way we can change the world and maybe make it a better place for us all. So those are my rambling midweek thoughts for this week, and I hope that you found something in them that you can carry with you. Tune in on Sunday to see how they get refined and shared. I know that I've missed recording some of the past Sunday services, and sorry about that. Life gets busy and we'll just absorb the love. If you missed the Sunday services, you can contact the office and we can make arrangements to send a paper copy to you, and you can connect with the themes that way. Also, I just wanted to remind you, or to let you know, actually, that the website is back up and functioning. We had, it was down for a while, but we got that fixed this week. So you can check that out and find our links there. With that, folks, I encourage you to, with some warmer days in the forecast, to go out and find some sun and fill your being with love and find your endless spring and share it with all who you meet. Take care, friends. God bless. Bye.